Guys, if you like my content, please like, share and subscribe. Hello guys, I'm Rahul. I'm back with another video. In my last video, I talked about loop, the list comprehension and the usages of loops, right? So in today's video, we will learn about functions. So what is function in Python? And in the end of this video, you will learn what is function, why we need function, built-in functions, user-defined functions, lambda functions, and also the scope of the variables in terms of functions, that is global and local variable. What are those? So let's start. So what is function? So function is basically a block of code which will run only when it is called. Okay, it can accept data which known as parameter, and based on that data it will process and then it will return some result which known as the return parameter. Okay, the return value. So in Python, you will use this def keyword to define a function. So define, the def keyword is the short form of define, and followed by def you will write your function name and then followed by this parenthesis and the colon. Okay, so it means that you have created a function named greet, but you have to write with an indentation. You have to write something inside this greet. So in that way Python will understand. If you use this indentation, Python will understand that yes, those codes will be inside the greet function. Okay, so here I can just say print hello. Okay, now if you run it, it will not print hello. Okay, why? Because it will only check for the syntax. Okay, if the syntax is correct or not, it will not run because we did not call the function yet. Okay, now if we call this function greet, it will print hello. Perfect. So again you can have another function, say wish, and here this function is going to accept a value that is known as parameter. So let's say I'll accept one value name. So here you have to write name and then you have to put the colon, and inside this you can say write hello and then the name parameter. Okay, now again if you execute, it will not run, it will only execute check the syntax. Okay, suppose you are missing this comma. If you run it, it will say the syntax error because it is, you are forgetting a comma, so you have to write it back. Let me put it back. So now it checks for the syntaxes and it's correct, so it will just stop there. Now if you want to run this wish function, you have to call that explicitly with a value as a parameter. If you run it, it will say hello Rahul. Okay, dynamic, perfect. Let's say another function, say add two numbers. Okay, let's say I'll take a and b, two parameters. So a function can take n number of parameters. This is our multi-parameter function. So here again I'll put a colon and then inside the function with this indentation, very important, I'll write print a plus b. Okay, so again it is only checking for the syntaxes, nothing else. Now if you call the function add two numbers and pass 1 and 2, it will return 3. So it will not return, it will just print 3. Okay, now we will come to the return part. So suppose you want to use this 3 later in your program. Okay, so since this function is not returning anything, it's only printing inside the function, you cannot use that 3 later in your program. Okay, so for that you have to write this return keyword and say a plus b. That way this function will know that okay, so this function is returning something, so I can assign a variable which can store this 3 in a variable called v. Okay, before, if you just say this and instead of return, if you do this print and say a plus b, okay, and call this inside this v, and if you pass 1 and 2 also. Okay, now if you try to print v, you will not see anything, it will say none. because this function is not returning anything, but this function does. Okay, here if you run this and say v, you'll see 3, but here you will not see because it's not returning anything. Only in this case it's returning, and that is why it's very important to have a function with parameters and a value, some value that will return. Okay, so these are the basic tips about function, how you need to write the function and all. Okay, so now why we need this function, what are the different advantages of the function? Okay, so the very important thing about the function is it will help you modularize your code, that is break down your code in a small snippet, and which will increase the readability of the next developer or the any other user in that case, to see what you have written as a part of your development. Okay, so this is very important, code modularization. Also it will reduce the redundancy. Okay, so if you have the same code and you are writing the same snippet of code every time in your program again and again, that is not a good thing, that is not a very good practice. Okay, if you want to reduce the redundancy, you have to use the function. Same snippet, you can use it anywhere in terms of the function, right? And there is one a principal concept of developing any software, that do not repeat yourself. If you have the same code, same set of code, same set of lines, same set of expressions, you have to put it in a block. That block is called a function, and you can use that function anywhere in your program whenever you need it. That is a basic concept of functions, very important. You have to recollect it every time you want to write a code or you want to develop any software. Very important. These are the basic tips about functions. And one more important thing about function is docstring, that is a document string. So basically that this is a very simple function, but suppose you are writing a function that is very complex. Okay, suppose you want to see the average of three numbers. Okay, or let's say average, the function is average, and you will take three number, and then you will return a plus b plus c divided by 3. Okay, so this is a function called average, but this function only take three numbers, not more than that. Okay, so if someone is using your function average, he will not know, right, why, what are the parameters and how many parameters you want to use. In that case, you can just say a docstring, which will start, which will be the first string of that function, and here it's a comment kind of stuff that will help the next developer understand what this function is actually doing. Okay, so you can say this function does not take more than three parameters, right? So now if someone wants to run this function, he can just do average dot doc, and it will print the docstring of this function. So, and in this way, the user or the developer, the next developer will know, whoever is using your function, they will know that yes, we cannot pass more than three parameters here, and if you pass three parameters, it will run easily. Okay, and it will give you the average of the data, average of the parameters. Okay, so this is a very important stuff, that this docstring, every developers who are using Python today, they should know about this, and this is a standard practice of Python, so you should use it. Very important. And now we'll go into the built-in functions. So these functions that we write, these are the user defined functions, right? Because we write it. Python was not aware of those functions before. Once you write it in your program, Python will know that yeah, this function exists as a part of your functions notebook, right? Okay, so we have a different type of built-in functions in Python. That is, we have a map function, we have a filter function, we have sum function. Okay, we have sorted function. So many functions we have as a built-in functions in Python. So suppose you want to use this sum function. So what is sum? So suppose you have a list called number, and as the element of the list we have 1, 23, 34, and then 45, then 56. Okay. Now if you want to get the sum of the list of the elements of the list, so you can just say sum and then numbers. You will see that it's returning 159. So this is a function that is a built-in functions in Python. Whenever you are creating any notebook using Python, this sorted, filter, and map all are inbuilt, and you can use it anywhere in your program. Say let's say there is another numbers list, and we have this 231, 231, then 56, then 4, then 5, okay, and then 8, 7. Now if you say sorted and say numbers, so it will print the sorted list, correct? So these are the basic functions that we have in Python, and there are also lots of functions. As we go into our further study, further tutorials, we will see what are the functions that we can use. There are some functions that we can import from the Python module, and then you can use that. Okay. Now we have a very important concept called Lambda function, which is this Lambda functions. Okay. So what is this? This Lambda functions is nothing but expression with an argument. So this is a function, this is an anonymous function which will take many arguments, but it will have only one expression. Okay. So this is a short form of a function that you can use in your program. So what it will say, that it will say lambda x, and then you want that whatever it is getting, the expression will be like, it will return the power of that. Okay. So this is a one line function basically, and you can assign it to a square variable, right? So this square is now a function. So if you see the square type, you will see it is a function now. So now if you write square and pass any number, say 2, it will return 4. Why? Because it is now a function, and it will return the expression value. This is the outcome of the function, and it will return that. So you can use this function in this way as well, like you can write def and then say square and then say x, and you can write return x squared to the power 2. Okay. And now you can say square this 2 here, and you can say that's this is returning 4. So instead of these 2 lines, you can just see this one line, and it will return the variable. Okay. So this is basically a lambda function. It is very helpful when you are using it in a, like, in a parameter of any further function. Okay. So suppose you have this map or filter, these functions. So what is this map function? Okay. So once I'll tell you about the map function, it will be very easy for you to understand why lambda is very important in map function. So what is map function? Map function is basically, suppose you have a alphanumeric list. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you have maybe 5, 6 as well. Okay. Or let's say it's a numeric list. Now you want all of this list element. Now all of the list elements are integer, right? Now you want them all to be a string. How you can do that? You can use the map function to do that. So this map function, if you go to the signature of this function, you will see that it takes a function as the first input and the iterables as the second input. Okay, so the iterable will be this numeric list, and we are trying to make the elements of the numeric list as string. Okay, convert each element of numeric to a string. So I can pass this str function here and numeric as my iterable. Okay, so I can keep it in a string variable. Okay, and if you try to print that string variable now, it will be a list. So I have to convert it to a list, and yeah, so all the elements of this numeric list has been converted to string. Perfect. So here, instead of the string, you can also write in this way: map, let's say string equals to map, and then lambda x, where x to be converted to string. So this is my function and this is my list iterable. So if you want to again try to see this print, try to print it, it will say that it has list of values that has been converted. So now suppose you want to use filter. So in filter, you can define a function and let's say a variable as the parameter. If this variable modulo 2 equals to 0, then return true. Okay, so if it's divisible by 2, then return true. Okay, so this function I have, and maybe I have a list called the number list, and which has 1 2 3 4 5 and 6. Okay, now you can use this filter function and pass this function as the, okay, so based on this function it will basically filter this list, which is the number list. Okay, so here what it will do, for each element it will go to the function variable and check for whether this is divisible by 2 or not. So if it's returned true, then we will keep appending those values inside this list. Okay, otherwise it will skip it. So again, if you want to print list of v, you will see only 2 4 and 6 has been printed, right? Why? Because this is the criteria of filtration of number list. Awesome. So this we can achieve using lambda as well. So suppose you have to use this, and you can say w equals to this. Instead of this function, you can just say lambda x, and you will say that x percent 2 equals to 0. Okay, so now if you print list of w, you will get 2 4 6, the same thing, but you can achieve it in a single line. You don't have to write this many number of lines. You don't have to define a separate function as well. Just anonymous function on the fly you can declare. That's pretty awesome, right? Great. Using lambda, you can definitely improve the performance of any of your Python programs. That's great. Now let's talk about the concept of local and global variables in Python. So now if you have a variable called x in which is equals to 0, now you want to calculate a length of a word length, and you will take word as the parameter and say x equals to length of word, and then say return x. Okay, this has to be def. Okay, now if you say calculate length and say Rahul, and then say print x. Okay, so now if you have this calculate length and print, so what will happen here? what will be the value of x? So the value of x will be 0 always. Why? Because this x is not defined inside any function. It's inside the notebook. It's inside this function notebook, not this calculate length function. Okay. So the scope of this x, this variable x, is way more than the scope of this x, which is inside. So this x is residing in a different memory location, and this x is residing in altogether different memory location in Python. So now since you are printing this x, this notebook has no connection to this x. This notebook doesn't know about this x. Okay, but this function does. This calculate length does. But this x is known to function. This function notebook. So hence it will only print the value of this x. But if you want to change the value of this x inside the function, you have to also declare this as global x. So now this calculate length will know, okay, so this x was already defined, I have to change this x. So now if you see, if you run this, if you run it first and then run it, you will see that this is 5, because now it will understand that, okay, so we have to change the global variable x, not the local x. And that way you will understand that how to change the global variable and what is the local variable. Okay, so let's look at one more example. Okay, here I'll provide a variable called s equals to 0, and then I'll write one function, that is function 1, and I'll say global s, and I'll say s equals to s plus 1 and print s. Perfect. And I'll have one more function called function 2, which will say s equals to s plus 2 and then print s. Okay, and here I'll call all of them func1, then func2, and then also I'll print s. So here what do you think will happen? So if I run it, it will throw an error because function 2 has no idea about this s. So it has been assigned, this s has been assigned before it has been declared. So hence function 2 will say that this s is unknown. So if you run it, you will see that this s is unknown basically. So if you provide s equals to 0 here, so what will happen? So this function 1 will know that this s is the outer s, the global s, because we have declared. But this function 2, now it has idea because this s has been declared locally. So the scope of this s is local, hence it's called a local variable, but scope of this s is global. So now if you run, you'll see that 1 2 1. Why? Because this s is 0, the same s has been assigned here, and then the global s became 1, so it prints 1. This s is 0 again, this is a local, and this 0 plus 2 is 2, so it prints 2, and then this print s is the again the global s, which is the this s, hence it prints 1 2 and 1. So I hope it's clear. Now let's go into the next very important topic called args and kwargs. So args and kwargs. So what is args and kwargs? So args is basically arguments, the number of arguments, the multiple number of arguments. Okay, suppose you have a function called my product. Okay, and you are passing a and b, and you are returning the product of a and b, which is this. Now if you run this my prod and say 1 and 3, it will return 3. Perfect. But what if you want more parameters? How can you do that? So in that case, you can add a, b and c and then a, b, c, d. But what if you don't know how many parameters will be there dynamically in your program? So yeah, it can happen many a times. So in that case, if you're unsure about the parameters, number of parameters, or you are programming something dynamically, so in that case you can use args. There is a star operator before the args also has to be added, because this star operator is called the unpacking operator. So if you here instead of AB, if you provide star args, that means this args has become a tuple now. It's a iterable. Okay. So it can take as many number of parameters you will pass, will take that many number of parameters. So now if you just see the type of the arg, you will see that it's a tuple. Okay, so let's run it my prod once with one variable just, and you will see that it's a tuple class. So it's basically a iterable. Okay, so now you can do this thing. So you can copy this, and here you can just say that for I in args, my product is equals to product into I, and you can simply return the product. So now if you call this product with 2 and 3, 2 comma 3, so you have to just declare this prod before, say 1. Now if you run it, you will see that it's 6. Now you can add as many number of parameters you want here. So you can say 2 3 4, it will return 24. You can say 2 3 4 5, it will return 120. Awesome. So because this args has now become a tuple, it can have as many number of entries you want. Okay, so this is called args parameter, and this star is called the unpacking operator. It is taking each parameter at a time and couple it in a tuple. So that is why this star args is very important here in Python. And in place of args you can provide anything, just ensure that you have a star just before that. So now what is kwargs then? So kwargs is basically keyword arguments. So everything is same about args with kwargs, only in case of kwargs you have to pass a keyword. It's a named parameter, it's a named argument. This args is a positional argument, but keywords kwargs is a named argument. So very important, you have to keep in mind. So suppose you have defined a function called func3, and you are passing kwargs as well. So that has to be prefixed by 2 stars basically. Okay, so you have to add 2 stars before kwargs, and that way Python will understand that okay, it's a keyword argument, and if you prefix 1 star, then Python will understand that it's a normal args, star args, which is a tuple. Okay, as soon as you add these 2 stars, this kwargs will become a dictionary. Okay, and the named parameter is basically the name will be the key of that dictionary, and the value that you are going to pass, that will be the value of that corresponding key. That's it. So if you want to see the type now, you will just say print args, which is a type. Basically I'm only interested in types, and if you pass kwargs and just run this function 3 with 1, and here while calling this you have to pass the name. Any name you can pass, but you have to pass some name. So let's say Rahul equals to 3. Okay, so if you run it, you will see that this args is tuple, but this kwargs is basically a dictionary. And if you want to see the value of this dictionary, you will see that if you just want to see the item, you will see, or just print the kwargs. Okay, you will see that it's a dictionary with this name as the key, and the actual value of the parameter is the value of that key, the corresponding key. So you can pass anything here. Let's say you can pass date, and if you run it, it says that the the key has been changed. The value remains same, the key has been changed. Okay, you can pass anything here, let's say Rahul, and instead if you pass Rahul here, and you will see that same thing happened, that it takes Rahul and it converted it to dictionary because we have a prefix double star. That is pretty awesome. So now next very important topic is the ordering of the argument. Okay, so ordering of the arguments. So here you can say that we have a function called myfunc3, and this function has to take at least two parameters. Okay, so you can say a and b, but then you are not sure about the maximum, the highest number of parameters. Then you can add args, because you have to make it dynamic, and if you want some named parameter as well, so you can say star kwargs as well. So this has to be the ordering of the arguments. You cannot pass, so if you want to print, okay, so this will run, but you cannot pass kwargs before args. It will throw an syntax error. So if you run it, it will say that syntax error because this ordering is wrong. So let's say this. Okay, so now if you call, let me print all of them, print b, print args and kwargs as well. Okay, so now if you run this myfunc3, if you call it with 1 2 3 and maybe width equals to 4, now if you run it, you will see that a has been assigned 1, b has been assigned 2, but args has been assigned 3, which is a tuple, and this, the last element, is kwargs element. Okay, so it's a dictionary. So that way you can make use of this args and kwargs and make your Python program more beautiful. Great. So with that, we're coming to an end of this video, and in my next video I'll talk about some more interesting stuff. Please stay tuned. Till then, goodbye. And please like, share and subscribe.